Hi. So in this lesson, we are going to explore basic data analysis. In the last lesson, we looked at how to clean data and make it ready for analysis. So in that same sheet that you duplicated when we did the lesson on data cleaning and all that, so just in one of the tabs here, you can see another sheet titled analysis. So this is another separate data. This is data on school enrollment or out of school children in select West African countries. So these are the countries, the country code, the number of out of school children female, number of out of school children male. So the first thing we're going to do is to freeze the header rows, these ones that are already emboldened and already uh, showed us how to do that. So just come to freeze up to row one or row one. And you can as well, let me undo, you can as well drag this. So it's going to be an header row. So if you scroll, the header remains static. So the first thing we are going to look at is how to sort data. So to sort the data sets, let's say I want to sort it alphabetically, I can just select the data set. Then come to data, you can see sort sheet. So you can say you want to sort from A to Z, and it's already sorted from A to Z by default. So let's say we want to flip it. We want to sort it from Z to A. So you see now it starts from Togo, Senegal, and the likes. And we can also sort by numbers. If you don't want to use the country name as the identifying or as the parameter for sorting, we just come back to data again, come to sort sheet. Now you see that this is column A. So what we want to sort with is column C. So we're just going to select this, come back to sort, then we can do Z to A. So it will rearrange it based on the highest number. And Nigeria has the highest number of female out of school children to the least, which is Cape Verde. So that's how to just basically sort. You can sort by the male, and you can also flip this. You can want to start from the lowest to the highest, just do A to Z. So your data start from Cabo Verde. So to just make it alphabetical like we did earlier, I'm just going to return it. All right. So that's basically how to sort the data. Now, another important thing that you can do when analyzing data is also to see how to filter, especially if you're working with very, very large data sets. Assuming you're working with all the countries in the world, and it's going to be more than what we have here. The data is going to be very long, and you might want to filter, you might want to see certain areas, all right, so that you are not going through a lot. So you can just come to data, then you can see create a filter. So this is the filter. You can select the countries you want to see. Let's just let me uncheck Togo and a host of other countries and just leave few countries, all right? So when you click on OK, you only see the countries that you selected. So in a very, very large, bulky data set, if you want to analyze West African countries, for instance, you don't need to delete all the other countries. You can just sort and filter just the countries you want to work on or the countries with the data you want to work on. And you can also sort by numbers. You can say, oh, I want to work with countries that have at least 100,000. So you can just let's say you have the total already. You can just come here and you can do filter by condition. There are a lot of condition that you can use. So you can just say 100,000. So it gives us only the data that has, you know, countries that are more than 100,000. You can also increase it to 1 million. That way you only have Nigeria. All right. So that's basically on how to filter. So you can also remove the filters. come to none. So let's just clear everything. Just come here and remove filter. So when you remove the filter, you get all your data. Now, how do you do basic formulas? For instance, we have all these countries with the male population of out of school children and the female population of out of school children. If you want to do total, let me just create header here, total. You do not have to manually compute all this information. You can just do a basic formula that will automatically help you calculate the total values and add it to the sheet. So you can use a sum formula because for us to get the total, we need to add this value to this value. So you can just do equals to, for you to work with formulas, you need to do equals to. It's already suggesting the right formula, but you can just do sum of, open a bracket. This is the first value, which is C2. Then you can put a colon. Colon means from this value to this value, and just add the two. Close the bracket, and you get the answer. And it's suggesting that you autofill, but I'm going to reject the suggestion because in addition to using sum, you can actually do plus. So you can do equals to C2 plus D2. And if you press enter, it will give you the same result. But if the data set is very, very large, let's say um, this one, for instance, if you want to add all these values from 2015 to 2023, instead of doing C plus D plus E plus F plus G plus H, you can just use the sum function, sum. Then you can do from C2 to K. So that's exactly what it's suggesting. So I'm just going to accept the suggestion. So it has given us the answer of all this. But there are instances where you might want to just put the plus, or if the formulas are very, very complex, maybe you want to multiply, you want to divide, and I think we're going to try that as well. So if you have the formula, you can just copy the formula and paste on the remaining sheets. So you don't have to insert the formula every time. It will understand that each row is unique. So for instance, here it's going to do C4. The following one will be C5, followed by C6, and so on and so forth. So that's basically how to use the sum function for formulas. Now let's do percentage. We can do percentage female, then percentage male. Now, how do we calculate percent? Usually, the formula is that you divide the value by total, then multiply by 100. So in this case, it will be C2 divided by the total, which is E2 multiplied by 100. So to do that formula, we can just say equals to C2 divided by E2 multiplied, that's the asterisk sign, by 100. So if you click enter, it will give us the percentage of female. So we can just autofill, apply the same formula. If you don't autofill, you can just copy and just paste. It will not paste the values, except you specify that you should paste the values. It will paste the formula. So let's just autofill. Now for male, the same concept equals to D2 over the total, which is E2 multiplied by 100. Then this is the percentage of male out of school children. Then you can do autofill. And now you have a very, very larger data that you can work with. For instance, we know that of all the out of school children in Benin, for instance, about 98% are female and only less than 2% is male. So you can now start telling your story from maybe a gender imbalance perspective. All right. So this basic analysis can just show you some stark differences, some oddities, something that are some patterns, some trends. In the last lesson, it's better that we have this, it's just be two decimal places. So I'm just going to trim it. So yes, 98% of out-of-school children in Benin are female. Let's look for Nigeria. Nigeria is kind of balanced, although we still see a higher percentage of female out-of-school children than we see for male. And I think is almost the same across board, with the exception of Mauritania and Cape Verde. So virtually in all the selected countries, we see higher percentages of out-of-school children who are female than we do for male. This is an angle, this is an idea you can explore. You can start looking at the causative factors. What are the reasons why we have more female children, not going to school and all that. So that's basically how to just work with the formulas. And sometimes you might also want to do average. Let's say want to see the average uh, number. What's the average number of out of school children across all these countries? The basic way to calculate average is to add all these values together, then divide by the total number of the countries. So if you add all the female together, divided by the total number of countries, you can get the average number of out of school children who are female for these select countries. Or you can also just use the average function. So you can do average C2 to C15, and it will give you the formula. It will give you the answer rather. And if you want to do it manually, not so manual, but if you want to do the work yourself, so you can first do the sum, then you divide it by, we have 14 countries, 14. So it will still give you the same figure. But we don't need average in this particular kind of data set because the countries are individual. Maybe it was Africa. If the countries are Africa, you can look at the average number of out-of-school children across Africa. That might make sense. But these are just select countries that we extracted for the purpose of analysis. So we are not going to do average. I'm just going to delete the row. So that's basically how to work with formulas. So another interesting thing in data analysis is what they call the if function. And for this data set, you're going to be using the if function to group all these countries into categories depending on the number of out-of-school children that they have. All right. So we can say, oh, if this number is less than 1,000, you should categorize it as low. If it is less than 100,000, you categorize it as high or average. And if it is around 1 million, we can say very high. All right. So let's just quickly get into that. So to use this function, you also have to come to another column. So let's just call this category. So we do equals to if. If, so we are working with the total number here. We can say if E2, okay? If E2 is less than, I think we can start from 100,000. 100,000, okay? Then we'll tell it the result to return. So that result, we'll just put quotation marks. We can say quite low, quotation marks again. Then to add other conditions, you just introduce another comma. Then if E2, the same E2 is less than, let's say 500,000, then comma again, quotation mark to give it the message to return. So 500,000, we can say average. All right. Continue with the conditions. If E2, let's do 1 million this time around. Then it should return high. Then let's add another one. If it to 10 million, it should return very high. Then we can close the bracket and click enter. So there is a problem with this. I'm just trying to debug it. Okay, we need to put an S because we have a quite quite a number of conditions. So what I did initially was just if, but if you are putting a lot of condition, then you have to use the pluralized version. So this is quite low, then you can just autofill the rest. So we can see, for instance, that the out of school children in Benin is quite low. In Burkina Faso is very high. In Cape Verde is quite low, very high, high, average, quite low, average, very high, high. So coming back to the filter I talked about earlier, let's assume we want to just see the countries with very high numbers. You can just come here, create a filter, then just come to select uncheck the rest, uncheck the rest, then leave only very high, and you click OK. You only see countries with very high out of school children. And you can see the total number here. Burkina Faso about a million, more than a million actually. Cote d'Ivoire 1.5, Niger or Niger Republic about 1.2, Nigeria about 9 million. So I'm just going to remove the filters. So with this, we've gotten a lot of insights from this data. We've been able to group it. We've been able to explore the percentages across, the different countries and all that. So now we'll move into pivot tables. So for pivot tables, what pivot tables basically do is it allows you to compare certain data. It helps you to find relationships between different indicators in the data set. So maybe you want to know the country, how many countries, for instance, are in the very high category, how many countries are in low category and all that. So to create a pivot table, you need to first select your data, all of your data. You need to select all of your data, then you go to insert, then you come to pivot tables. So it's better you put them in a new sheet so that it doesn't overlay on this particular sheet. And this looks like we have a lot of space, but sometimes when you're working, you might not have plenty white space around you. So it's better to just put it in a separate sheet. So when you create it, this is what you get. These are the rows. You can see that these columns are the values. Don't forget that I mentioned that with pivot table, you can find relationships between different indicators, different data sets, and you can do comparison, you can find trends and all that. So let's just demonstrate that. For row, I can add category, for instance, and for the values are the data sets that you want those rows to show. So I can just add country name as my values. And you notice that it's summarizing data by counts. So basically what this means is that for the average category where the out of school children is average based on the category we created in the previous sheet, we have 4 countries in this category. For the high category, we have 3 countries. For the low categories, we have 3 countries. For the very high, we have 4 countries. So imagine we are working with a very large data set, maybe all the countries in Africa, and we created this category. Then you can look at how many countries, has a very high out of school children. So if there are about 50 something countries in Africa, and if you're getting like 40 or 45, you can now say, oh, in most African countries, there's a very alarming rate of out of school children. Okay. There's some suggested parameters here as well. This is the sum of female and male in each category. So for average, the total sum of female out of school children, the total sum of male out of school children. You can just play around and try and get, reasonable insight. So I'm just going to clear this. Let's try something else. Check this. So for our row now, we'll be adding country. So for the country, for your columns or for the values, you can just want to look at the percentage of female out of school children. So it gives you all this. So from here, you can just look at how many percent of uh, female out of school children do you have in each country. So you can also decide that you want to look at the median value. So it gives you that. If you want the average percentage is about 57%. If you want the max is 98. It gives you the value here. If you want the minimum value, which is 45, you just get all these insights from this large data set. And from that, you can now craft a compelling narrative. You can find an angle. You can find a story. You can find, something hidden in that data set that can now help you, in your reporting, in your work as a journalist. So I hope that is very clear. If you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out.